This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and LifeLock has tips to protect your identity. Use strong passwords, set up multi-factor authentication, report phishing, and update the software on your devices. And for comprehensive identity protection, let LifeLock alert you to suspicious uses of your personal information. LifeLock also fixes identity theft, guaranteed or your money back. Stay smart, safe, and protected with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, Soda Nation? Wow. What do you say? We took our first L and in a bad way. I mean, gosh. I had hoped to come back after the Red River Rivalry and have some fun. But man, we're coming off a tough one. This was brutal, almost in every sense of the imagination. Obviously, Oklahoma falls to Texas 23-6 and what is the most important game of the season. And it was a rivalry game that was every bit as intense as advertised, but just not in the way we had hoped, right? This was a game, as it typically is, just filled with emotion, filled with energy, and for both sides, but particularly for Oklahoma, high expectations. And yet, when it was over, Oklahoma walks out of the Cotton Bowl with, I think, more questions than answers. So what I want to do in this episode is just kind of break some things down. Like, what went wrong? What did anything go right? What does this game tell us about where Oklahoma really stands heading into this final stretch of the season that is not going to get any easier? So let's start with what everyone's talking about before kickoff, and that is the return of John Mateer. It was will he or won't he? That was the theme of the week. And Mateer's, when it broke on Thursday that he was probable and that momentum built through Friday, it was supposed to be something that sparked not just the fan base, but the guys actually on the field, right? It was that comeback story. It was that missing piece for an Oklahoma team that had kind of battled through last week without its leader, and this was going to be the Heisman moment. And I think initially, from an emotional standpoint, you could feel it, right? You saw Mateer throwing passes in the warm-ups. The fans were fired up. His teammates were fired up. And everybody wanted to see him step back in and lead this team and the way he did against Michigan, against Auburn. But once the game started, it was clear that this story wasn't going to be about redemption. It was about rust. Now, John Mateer finished 20 of 38, but the 3 interceptions is going to be the story that carries over. And I mean, each one of those interceptions was just a punt, right? Right in the gut. You could see the frustration on his face. You could obviously see the frustration amongst the fan base, and forcing balls into double coverage. Now you remember, a while back, I referred to Mateer as that gunslinger mentality type quarterback that's just going to, I don't know if I can make this throw, I'm just going to try it. And we've seen that in the past with quarterbacks who have had brilliant careers. And Brent Favre is the guy that always comes to mind whenever I talk about this style of quarterback. But sometimes that doesn't work out. And when it doesn't work out, it's usually not just bad, it's awful. And you saw him press this, and where maybe he was doing it once a game, he did it more than the 3 interceptions. And it's just to me, I wondered if it was more about rhythm and rust than it was about the gunslinger mentality. Now, I think the one across the middle was a misread. But just they all just were bag breakers. And setting Texas up in good field position, I think you got to credit the defense, because I think the other side of the story of these interceptions is they were critical towards Oklahoma's offensive effort, especially that one before the half. I put out on Facebook on our Facebook page that one before the half. That's going to live. That one right there. What I said was that's going to live rent free in my head, right up there with Lincoln Riley's squib kick. You're up 6-3. There's 10 seconds left. You've got 0 timeouts. Just kick the field goal. Use your weapon and go into the locker room with some momentum, up 9-3. But instead, you take a shot on a bad throw towards the end zone. And what I said was the Sooners gave up momentum that they never got back. So, just the decision-making was off. The timing was off. And you could see it. There were throws that were high. There were throws that were late. There were throws that were behind. I don't know if it was his grip. I don't know if it was his release. I don't know if it was his confidence. But all of it, it all just looked out of sync. Now, let's be clear about something. This doesn't change who John Mateer is. He's still the guy. He's still the leader of this team. But I think it is a reminder that even the toughest of guys, even the toughest players, they need rhythm. They need reps, especially coming off of injury. And where everybody was wanting him back, you can't help but think and wonder, did he come back too soon? Now, if you're looking for the glasses half full, I think you find encouragement in the fact that John Mateer never shied away from contact. He never looked defeated. He looked frustrated at times, but he never looked defeated. But in this offense, in any offense, at this level, courage it's not enough. You've got to have precision. You've got to have timing. And that was clearly missing. It was missing almost from the get-go. But let's move from Mateer for just a minute. We will come back to him in the second half of the podcast. But let's move from him and let's talk about the real root of the problem here. And that's the offensive line and the running game. We've seen inconsistency all season. But you've got to be concerned at this point. Because you had the Auburn game. Then you had a week off to try to fix some things. Then you had Kent State. And I was of the mindset, along with, I think, the majority of Sooner Nation, that, they're not really going to do a lot against Kent State, but they'll unleash some new wrinkles, some things against Texas. No. We are in a full-blown crisis now with Oklahoma's running attack. 30 carries produced 48 yards. If you're trying to do the math, that's 1.6 yards per carry. You're not going to win games of this magnitude with that type of average. And from the start, Texas's defensive front, they were winning the battle at the line of scrimmage. And Caleb mentioned it on Thursday night. We talked about how important that point of attack was. And Texas controlled the line of scrimmage. They pushed Oklahoma's front five around, and they shut down any hope of Oklahoma having a balanced offensive attack. And now you don't have a run threat. So that means play action, it's meaningless. Pass protection, it gets exposed. And Texas knew it. Man, they set back, they read Mateer's eyes, they jumped routes. And it was like they were in practice. And the interior of this line, they struggled to pick up stunts The tackles had a tough time keeping up with the speed on the edge. And the result was what we saw. We saw pressure, we saw forced throws, and unfortunately, we saw turnovers. And look, this is where, to me, I think it becomes a schematic question as much as a personnel question. Because I think the Sooners have talent. I think Torrey Blaylock can run the football. Jaden Ott came as an all-conference player. And I don't know that the issue is the backs. I don't know that it's not, but I don't know that it is. I think you've got to look at blocking and the design of the play. And this offense, they have to find a way. Moving forward, you're on the road next week. I mean, again, nothing's getting easier. You've got to find a way to create leverage. You've got to, whether you use in motion, whether you're trying to stretch defenses horizontally before you attack them vertically. I mean, otherwise, the opponents are going to keep loading the boxes. And what Oklahoma is going to keep seeing is stacked boxes and collapsing pockets. And I don't think Texas did anything super exotic. I think they just lined up, they played physical, and they trusted their front seven. And that's what Oklahoma used to do to teams. And the offense, you used to, if you tried that against this offense, you paid dearly. And the offense has to rediscover that mentality. They have to rediscover that ability. So I think, I know people have their opinion. I'm one of them. You know, everybody has an opinion. But I really think, man, you look at the running game and the offensive line play, and to me, that's the culprit. That's it, right there. You got the turnovers by John Mateer. Yep. You got the punt return, the special teams blunder. Yep. You've got the call before the half that you just walked away from a field goal and just decided to throw an interception instead. But I think all that comes back to the offensive line. All that comes back to the inability to run the football. Now let's give some credit where it's due, because I think some people are going to be harsh, maybe more so than what's deserved, because I think this defense deserved a better outcome. Now hear me out here. For most of the game, Oklahoma's defense looked every bit as elite as they've been advertised. They held Texas to 3 points in the first half. Don't lose sight of that. They held Texas to 3 points in the first half. And that's usually a recipe for success. They were flying to the ball, they were tackling well, and they were keeping Arch Manning uncomfortable. But you can only ask a defense to bail you out for so long. And when the offense keeps turning the ball over and they can't sustain drives, fatigue sets in. And that's exactly what happened. And Manning's 12-yard touchdown in the third quarter, I think that kind of broke the dam. Then you got the 75-yard punt return that sealed it up. But even with that, I mean, this group, Kendall Daniels, David Stone combined for 10 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. This front line, they continue to prove that they are championship caliber. They were disciplined, they were aggressive, and they were fundamentally sound for most of the day. And I think that this defense can carry Oklahoma through the gauntlet of what's remaining on the schedule, but they can't do it by themselves. So what does all this mean? I mean, yeah, this one hurts. It always does when it's against Texas. You're looking at 3 of the last 4 now. Brent Venables drops to 1-3 in this rivalry. But let's keep some perspective here. We're in the 6th game of the season, and Oklahoma just had its first loss. We're still seeing an improved team. And as of right now, this isn't a season ender. It's a setback. And maybe, if we want to hold out hope, if we want to be optimistic, maybe it's the kind of wake-up call that, good teams need. Again, the Sooners are sitting at 5-1. They still have one of the top defenses in the country, and they're still right in the thick of the SEC hunt. But this game did reveal a few truths. First and foremost, balance matters. You can't lean on one side of the ball forever. Second, John Mateer's health and confidence, that's going to define the offensive ceiling moving forward. And third, the staff has to adapt faster. Let's not forget that Ben Arbuckle is a young offensive mind. I think he's a great offensive mind, but he got out-coached. There's a learning curve there that he's going to have to go burn the midnight oil and figure out how to keep this from happening. How do you keep this from happening in Columbia, South Carolina? How do you keep this from happening in Knoxville, Tennessee? How do you keep this from happening in Tuscaloosa, Alabama? So whether it's protection schemes, whether it's run fits, whether it's play calling and rhythm, the margin for error is razor thin. And so the Cotton Bowl didn't really expose Oklahoma as much as it reminded us and them who they have to become. They've got to be physical. They've got to be balanced. They've got to be composed. Because there's things there that they can clean up. You got to believe that they can clean up the turnovers. I still believe somehow, some way, they can establish a modest run game. And that will allow the defense to keep dictating tempo. I don't think at this moment there's a reason not to believe that as November hits, they're still not going to be in the conversation in the SEC championship. They're not going to be in the conversation for the playoff. But they got to go back and fix some things, and they've got to fix them in a hurry.
Every leap in American history has needed breakthrough energy.
Ignition, liftoff.
Now, AI is here, and Chevron is working to power it. We're aiming to develop multi-gigawatt power plants near data centers, designed with future pathways to lower carbon intensity. AI gets the power it needs, communities get the jobs, and the grid stays strong. Powering AI today builds America's next superpower.
This episode is brought to you by Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 is the ultimate all-out warfare experience. Rip through the skies in aerial dogfights. Demolish your surroundings for a strategic advantage. Harness complete control over every action and movement using the kinesthetic combat system. Drop into multiplayer with your squad, or fight furiously as a member of the Dagger 1-3 squad in a gritty, adrenaline-fueled single-player campaign where you'll defend a world on the edge of collapse.
All right, Sooner Nation, let's take a breath. Let's just all take a big breath. Yes, as we said, this is a tough one. But this team isn't broken. Now, they're bruised, they're humbled, and if history teaches us anything, they're probably angry. And sometimes that's exactly what sparks a turnaround. And Oklahoma's next challenge is to respond. Because the season's far from over. You still have 6 games left. And look, the Cotton Bowl has, like we said, it's always been the stage for emotion. Chaos, comebacks, heartbreak. And this Saturday was no different. But this time, it was Oklahoma on the wrong end of that emotional swing. But I think you can go back to those first 2 quarters. And you do see what this team is on its way to becoming, right? Because through the first 29 minutes and 50 seconds, it felt like Brent Venables' team, they were on their way to a gritty win. I mean, they were on the verge, knocking on the door of going up 9-3 at the half. They had been playing smart. They had been physical. And they did. For the first half, they dictated the tempo. And they suffocated Texas with defense. But, man, we see how quickly things can change, like in an instant. Instead of kicking a field goal and going up 9-3, John Mateer throws that interception. And then the next thing you know, you're looking up after the fourth quarter and you're walking out the field losing 23-6. And it's a game that was less about big plays, and I really think more about momentum and field position and mistakes. This game, I think it was as close to like an old school slugfest that we've seen. It was very similar to the Auburn game. But it was Texas that stood taller. And we know what went wrong. We know what went right. But do we really know what this loss means moving forward? And again, I don't want to keep going back to the same thing, but it is what it is. Because everybody was juiced about John Mateer. And I mean, you can always play what if, right? But I mean, I guess I kind of feel a little bit more entitled here because I was the guy on record saying John Mateer wasn't going to play. And sure, I was wrong about that. But should he have played? I mean, on paper, it made sense, right? On paper, it made sense. You look at his leadership, you look at his toughness, you look at his presence in the huddle, and that's the team missed that. And it's that the team is defined by that. But I think what we saw in the Cotton Bowl on Saturday is that sometimes you can have a really great story about the comeback from the hand surgery, and then that really great story meets harsh reality. And that's what happened at the Cotton Bowl. And like I said, I think from that opening drive, you could just see that the timing wasn't there. And when you think about 210 yards, 20 for 38, just above 50% on pass completion, yeah, it's okay. But the 3 interceptions. I mean, look, 3 interceptions. They weren't. Sometimes you have an interception that's just kind of a fluky bounce, right? It gets tipped at the line or your receiver goes off of his hands. That's not what these were. These were drive killers. These took points off the board, particularly that one before the half. The other 2 were either just across midfield or right around midfield, putting Texas in good defensive or good offensive position and putting the defense in bad position. But again, keep this in mind. Of the 3 interceptions, Texas didn't benefit a single point. I think if I'm just going by memory here, and not someone's going to look it up and just blow me up on Facebook, but I think the only time Texas scored off of an Oklahoma turnover was one of the turnovers on downs that led to a field goal. So the defense rose to the occasion, but where it killed Oklahoma, like I said earlier, was just what it did to the offense. And I will go to my grave with that one right before the half being the most brutal. I mean, and like Malik Muhammad, kudos to him for getting the interception, but he didn't really have to work hard for it because it's almost like Mateer threw it right at him. But think about this sequence, right? Think about what happened. You're on the verge of going up 9-3. Instead, you take a shot at the end zone, and then Texas opens the third quarter with a 75-yard scoring drive that was the touchdown to DeAndre Moore. And so you were knocking on the door of being up 9-3, and then just like that, you're down 10-6. And that sequence, interception, touchdown, I think it flipped the game. It flipped this entire game. And from that point on, I don't think Mateer ever found confidence or rhythm. You look at passes sailing high. You look at I think his internal clock sped up a little bit. And man, that Longhorn defense could smell it. They brought the pressure. They set on the routes, and they feasted on what was a very one-dimensional offense for Oklahoma. And I don't want to take anything away from John Mateer, because I think he deserves some credit for playing through pain, for playing banged up. He deserves credit for showing the leadership. And he didn't quit on the team. But the reality is he looked like a quarterback who had surgery on his hand 17 days ago. He looked like a quarterback who was rusty, who was out of sync. And that's not an indictment against him. That's just the truth. And against this type of defense, that's all it takes for a close game to unravel. And again, unraveling it happens so fast. And I think it just goes back to, because the pressure of not being able to run the ball, the pressure of not being balanced. And 48 yards on 30 carries is just ridiculous. And the fact that they ran the ball 30 times, it shows that they see the value of running the football. But 1.6 yards per carry also shows how inept they are. You just can't win. Not in the Cotton Bowl, not against Texas, not anywhere. And I mean, we're pointing right back here. What we did in the first half, the first segment, is the offensive line got pushed around. They were dominated by the Texas front seven. The Longhorns blew up zone reads. I mean, they were there before handoffs even were finished. And I don't think it was for a lack of trying. I mean, Oklahoma mixed up formations. They tried stretch plays. They tried some misdirection. A few quick tosses. Nothing worked because the line kept collapsing. And when you can't run, the offense doesn't work. Like we said, play action doesn't work. Defenders just sit and wait. And we saw Mateer force things. I mean, it's a real domino effect. And so Texas defensive coordinator, he deserves some credit. He definitely had the best of Ben Arbuckle. He dialed up pressure at the perfect moments. You saw 5 6-man blitzes. You saw 2 safeties deep, just enough to erase the deep ball. And that's, Mateer was left in no man's land so many times. And Arbuckle couldn't figure it out. No time to throw deep, no room to run short, and not able to throw in the middle range. And you knew, I don't know about you, but I knew by the time the fourth quarter rolled around, the rhythm was gone. The frustration was mounting, and this game was over with in the fourth quarter. You didn't have to wait till the final gun. And this is the harsh reality. This is what we have to face, because the truth is Oklahoma's offensive line has been inconsistent all year long. The running game has been inconsistent all year long. Now, the potential's been there. We've seen flashes of physicality and dominance, but that came against Temple. That came against Kent State. And against the type of elite fronts that you're going to see through this conference stretch, they've been exposed. And they've got to find answers fast. They've got to find them. Whether it's tweaking blocking schemes, whether it's rotating more or less personnel, or maybe just simplifying the approach. Because we saw against Auburn, we saw against Texas, if they can't establish balance, John Mateer's not always going to be enough to carry them. Carried him through Michigan, carried him through Auburn. Texas finally burned him. And everybody watches. Everybody watches what one team does from week to week. And now you got to figure it out. But I want to praise the defense one more time. Because like I said, they didn't deserve that outcome. And again, I know people are going to be critical, and that's okay. This is an emotional game, an emotional rivalry, and it was an emotional loss. But I think it was another impressive effort from a group of defenders that just continues to prove that it's one of the best in the nation. They held Texas to, like I said, just 3 points in the first half. They forced third and long situations, and they kept Manning uncomfortable for most of the day. And again, I think the biggest thing that I think the biggest thing that we see from the Texas defense is that they kept Mateer's mistakes from haunting this team. None of those interceptions directly led to points. So they bailed out the offense every stinking time. And you saw guys do what they do. You saw them flying around. You saw them making plays behind the line of scrimmage. I mentioned Kendall Daniels. I mentioned David Stone. Taylor Wayne had 3 tackles for loss just himself. So you saw them set the tone. But here's the thing. Even great defenses break when they're left out there too long. And that's exactly what happened. By the third quarter, you see the legs begin to fade. And finally, Texas and Arch Manning found a rhythm, hit a few chunk plays. They get their breakthrough. Manning's touchdown to Moore, cracked that door open. And again, that 75-yard punt return was the dagger, right? That put everything on ice. That was the final. That was the knockout blow. You know, and even after the game, Venables said it. He summed it up. Our guys fought their tails off. They gave us a chance. We've just got to help them out offensively. He is exactly right. Take away what you want. Say what you want. But the defense did its job. And I think this was a reminder that, again, no matter how good you are on one side of the ball, you can't win if the other side doesn't carry its weight. And we saw that. We saw that third quarter. And that was the difference. That I don't know. I think this is the third time I've gone back to it now, just because it was that big of a moment to me. That interception right before halftime led to then you got Manning's touchdown right after. The energy's gone. The momentum is gone. The crowd noise, it's all gone off of those two sequences. And I don't think it happens that way if you go in 9-3. And to me, it's not a game in which Oklahoma was outclassed. I don't think they were. They just made too many mistakes. And I don't want to take credit away from Texas. I hate Texas, but we have to give the Longhorns their credit. But saying Oklahoma made too many mistakes is not taking away credit from Texas, because they forced a lot of them. I think they forced all 3, if we're being honest. Oklahoma failed to adjust. They lost control of the line of scrimmage, and then they lost control of the emotional rhythm of this game. And I want to kind of start wrapping up by saying there's something encouraging here, is that the season's not over. I mean, you're sitting at 5 wins, and you're still in October. Don't forget, Oklahoma didn't get the 6th win last season until game 11. You're going into game 7 next week. So we're not even close to being done with this season. And like I said, you're sitting at 5-1. You still got one of the best defenses in the country. And I think you're still fully capable of competing for an SEC title. But you've got to regroup. The time now is to regroup. And you don't have time like you did on the bye week. The offense has to rediscover its identity. John Mateer has got to find a way to get reps and rhythm. And that offensive line, they've got to find their answers right now. Because if they can do that, if they can find even just a little bit of balance, this is a team that can rebound. I don't think this is as much about talent as it is about execution. And I think as tough as it was at the Cotton Bowl on Saturday, it was a reminder of that. So yeah, the Red River Rivalry, it didn't go the way Oklahoma wanted it to. It didn't go the way I wanted it to. It didn't go the way you wanted it to. But like I said, rivalry games have a way of revealing truth. And what this game revealed is just simple. It said Oklahoma's close, but they've got to clean up the details. And it wasn't a loss of identity. I think it was a lesson in margin. And John Mateer showed, courage coming back, but he also showed rust. The offensive line showed effort, but they didn't show any edge. The defense, they showed their championship potential. So now how are they going to respond? We've seen them respond before into Venables. Usually they respond with accountability. Usually they respond with energy. And I don't know, maybe this game could end up being like a spark that refocuses everything. Because I know as much as we hate it, we absolutely hate it, the season's still wide open. The story is still being written. And I think for Oklahoma, it's not about what happened in Dallas. It's about what happens next. So that's it for this episode, recapping the Red River Rivalry. Man, I hate it. I know you hate it, but it's game week again. South Carolina's coming up next. Thank you so much for listening. Please, please, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, leave a ranking or whatever you want to do there. But let's get ready. Let's get ready for South Carolina because that's a big one as well. Everyone's big now, right? Everyone's big. There's no margin of error. Hey, have a great week, everybody. See you soon.